The wind howled through the empty streets of Crestwood, biting at Sarah Collins' cheeks as she sat on a park bench, shivering under the dim glow of a flickering streetlight. Her thin coat, worn and frayed at the edges, offered little protection against the cold. She pulled it tighter around her, her breath visible in the frosty air. Her stomach growled, a constant reminder of the hunger that had become her companion over the past few weeks. Sarah reached into her pocket, her fingers brushing against the last crumpled dollar she had to her name. She pulled it out, staring at it as if it held the answers to all her problems. A single dollar. That's all that stood between her and complete despair. A week ago, she had lost her job at the diner. The manager had said it was budget cuts, but Sarah knew the truth. She'd seen the way he looked at her, the way he'd made excuses to cut her hours until there were none left. A month ago, she'd lost her apartment. The rent had gone up, and she couldn't keep up. Now, she had nothing. No job, no home, no hope. Her eyes drifted to the convenience store across the street. The bright neon sign buzzed faintly, casting a warm glow that seemed almost mocking in its cheerfulness. Inside, she knew there was food, warmth, and maybe even a moment of respite from the cold. But what could she buy with a single dollar? A bag of chips? A candy bar? It wouldn't fill the emptiness inside her. Then her gaze landed on the lottery display near the counter. The Power Jackpot Lottery, $75 million grand prize. The words seemed to leap out at her, bold and enticing. She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "What are the chances?" she muttered to herself, but something inside her whispered, "What if?" It was a ridiculous thought, she knew. The odds were astronomical. But then again, what did she have to lose? $1? She couldn't even buy a decent meal with it. At least this way, there was a chance, no matter how small, that her life could change. With a deep breath, Sarah stood up, her legs stiff from the cold. She crossed the street, the dollar clutched tightly in her hand. The bell above the door jingled as she stepped inside, the warmth of the store enveloping her like a hug. The cashier, an elderly man with kind eyes and a gentle smile, looked up as she approached. "Can I help you, miss?" Sarah hesitated, then placed the dollar on the counter. "One ticket, please." The man raised an eyebrow, glancing at her worn coat and tired eyes. "Are you sure? You don't look like you should be spending money on this." Sarah forced a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "It's just $1. Can't get much with it anyway." The man nodded slowly, his expression softening. He handed her the ticket, his fingers brushing hers for a brief moment. "Good luck," he said, his voice warm and sincere. Sarah took the ticket, folding it neatly and tucking it into her pocket. She didn't believe in luck, not really. But as she stepped back out into the cold, she couldn't help but feel a tiny spark of hope. Little did she know, her world was about to change forever. The night was colder than usual, and Sarah found herself curled up on a thin cot in a homeless shelter, her ticket still folded neatly in her pocket. She hadn't thought much about it since buying it earlier that day. After all, what were the chances? The next morning, she wandered into a small diner, scraping together enough change for a cup of coffee. The warmth of the mug in her hands was a small comfort as she sat in the corner, her eyes fixed on the TV above the counter. The morning news was on, and the anchor's voice filled the room. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, the Power Jackpot Lottery results. The winning numbers are 14, 27, 33, 45, 50, and the Powerball 7. Sarah's heart stopped. Those were her numbers. Her hands trembled as she pulled the ticket from her pocket, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She checked the numbers once, twice, 3 times. $75 million. The room seemed to blur around her, the noise of the diner fading into a distant hum. She couldn't believe it. This couldn't be real. It had to be a mistake. The diner owner, a burly man with a kind face, noticed her sudden change in expression. "You okay, miss?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. Sarah couldn't find the words. She just held up the ticket, her hand shaking. The man's eyes widened as he realized what she was holding. "Holy?" he started, but the words caught in his throat. Within moments, the entire diner was in an uproar. People clapped, some laughed in disbelief, and a few even wiped away tears. Sarah had gone from homeless to millionaire overnight. But the real challenge was yet to come. News of Sarah's win spread like wildfire. Reporters camped outside the shelter, desperate for an interview. Strangers approached her on the street, begging for money. Long-lost friends resurfaced, their sudden interest in her life painfully transparent. Sarah was drowning in attention, and it was overwhelming. Everyone wanted something from her, and she didn't know how to navigate it all. That's when she met David Parker, a financial advisor who offered to help. "You need to be smart about this, Sarah," he said, his tone serious. "Money disappears faster than you think." She nodded, feeling completely out of her depth. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted. David helped her set up a plan, ensuring her newfound wealth was managed wisely. But as the initial shock wore off, Sarah began to think about what she really wanted to do with the money. Then, in the midst of her whirlwind, she saw Ma'am Eleanor. Eleanor was an elderly woman who had once given Sarah a meal when she was starving. Sarah had never forgotten her kindness, and now she saw that Eleanor was struggling to pay her rent, facing eviction. Without hesitation, Sarah paid off her debts. Then she found the cashier from the convenience store, the one who had sold her the ticket. She handed him a check. "You gave me my shot," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "Here's yours." Slowly, Sarah started using her wealth to lift others out of darkness. She funded shelters, provided scholarships, and gave people the opportunities she had never had. But the biggest test came when her estranged father showed up, the man who had abandoned her years ago. Tears welled in her eyes as he begged for help. The scars he left still ached, but could she deny him the second chance she had been given? Sarah stood at a crossroads. Revenge or redemption? After days of soul-searching, Sarah made her choice. She forgave. But she didn't forget. Instead of handing him a blank check, she offered him a job, a chance to rebuild himself, just like she had. Her wealth wasn't about luxury or revenge. It was about hope. Years passed. Sarah used her fortune to create shelters, fund scholarships, and give others the opportunities she never had. She stayed humble, always remembering where she came from. And one cold evening, she found herself outside that same convenience store. A young girl stood there, clutching her last dollar, debating between food and a ticket. Sarah smiled warmly and handed her a meal. "Sometimes you don't need luck," she said softly. "Sometimes you just need someone to believe in you." The girl looked up, eyes wide. "Thank you," she whispered. Sarah walked away, heart full, knowing that her last dollar had been the best thing she had ever spent.